These documents in FBI possession, your possession, detail at least 20 men, including Mr. Jes Staley, CEO of Barclays Bank, who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked victims to, victims including minors such as Virginia Roberts Jeffrey. May she rest in peace.
Yeah, you just heard that. That was Congressman Thomas Massie grilling FBI Director Kash Patel on the second day of the hearing, where he's essentially testifying and answering questions before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Actually, no, that was Congressman Thomas Massie, so this is not the Senate Judiciary Committee. I guess now he's testifying before members of the House. And I'm glad he's doing that because Thomas Massie came prepared. He had a line of questioning that I found worthy of highlighting. And then more importantly, I think that Massie managed to catch Kash Patel in multiple inconsistencies. So we're going to show you that, but you just saw him name names. He just named someone who, according to the documents and allegedly according to Thomas Massie, was one of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. So that's pretty amazing. He's been willing to name names. He said, if the Epstein files are never released, the victims of Epstein's are willing to share the names with him, and he will basically make those names public. But I want you to hear more of what Thomas Massie had to say in his, in the lead up to his question to FBI Director Kash Patel. Take a look at this.
I watched some of your Senate hearing yesterday when Senator Kennedy asked you, you've seen most of the files, who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these women to besides himself? You replied, according to the transcript, there is no credible information that he trafficked them to anyone else. You also said somewhere in the hearing and here today that the problem is that the case files are constrained by limited search warrants from 2006 to 2007 and that the non-prosecution agreement hamstrung future investigations. Those constraints only apply to the Southern District of Florida. They do not apply to the Southern District of New York, the location of the 2019 sex trafficking indictment, which produced many things, including a series of FD 302 documents. According to victims who cooperated with the FBI in that investigation, these documents in FBI possession, your possession, detail at least 20 men, including Mr. Jes Staley, CEO of Barclays Bank, who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked victims to.
Okay, so we're gonna get to Jes Staley in just a moment. We're gonna talk about who he is and what his relationship was with Jeffrey Epstein. Because naming names is a big deal, and Thomas Massie now on the second occasion has been willing to do that. Before we get to that though, we gotta give Massie credit for calling Kash Patel out for the lie that he told when he was testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee just yesterday. He essentially claimed, there's nothing we can do at this point. The investigation is over. He made it seem as though as FBI director at this point, he's hamstrung. There's nothing he can do. You can't open investigations into Jeffrey Epstein's clients. But obviously Thomas Massie just proved that is not the case. So what's going on here? Why are you refusing to not only release the Epstein files, which I think the American people should obviously have access to, there should be transparency by our government. But more importantly, if you know that there are Epstein clients and these 302 documents list them, why aren't you opening investigations into these clients who victimized minors? So I thought that was a telling moment to say the least. Now let's talk a little bit about Jes Staley, who's one of the 20 people that Thomas Massie is referring to from these 302 documents. So basically the 302 documents, for those who don't know, are basically like the testimony that the victim shared through the investigation. It's a summary of all of that info, right? So he has those 302 documents. And so who is Jes Staley? Well, he did have a long running relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. In 1999, Staley was the chief executive for JP Morgan's private bank. And he was also part of a team that managed money and investments for Jeffrey Epstein, with whom he quickly developed what is referred to as a fairly close personal relationship. And it was a close relationship. He went to the Jeffrey Epstein Island, vacationed with him, alleged that he went on family vacations. I don't know if I believe that, but here's what else we know. Staley was soon holidaying on Epstein's private island, flying on his private plane and gaining access to an impressive portfolio of ministers, entrepreneurs, and royalty. The relationship ended up bolstering Staley's profile on Wall Street and even connecting his daughter to senior figures at Ivy League universities. So you kind of get a sense of how things work for the insiders, right? Now, that relationship, though, also eventually ended up destroying Staley's career. Why is that? Well, in July of 2019, Epstein was arrested on child sex trafficking charges, accused of sexually exploiting and abusing dozens of girls at homes in Manhattan and Palm Beach, Florida. Some victims were as young as 14, US prosecutors alleged. So that drew attention to Epstein's friends, including Staley. By the time that this happened, right? By the time the 2019 arrest of Epstein occurred, at that point, Staley is the chief executive over at Barclays. He had moved on. And so Barclays told the Financial Conduct Authority in October of 2019 that the pair did not have a close relationship and were last in contact well before Staley took over as chief executive 4 years earlier. That was not true. That was a lie. A total lie. A subsequent FCA investigation involving 102,000 emails from JP Morgan convinced the regulator it had been misled. It alleged that the pair were indeed close friends and stayed in touch via Staley's daughter for years after he joined Barclays. Now, keep in mind, this was the second time Jeffrey Epstein had been arrested. The first time was in 2006. So homeboy is still gallivanting around town, having a close personal relationship with Jeffrey Epstein after he was arrested for the first time. So he did stay in touch with Epstein after he was arrested in 2006. He even emailed Epstein, and apparently there's evidence of this, in 2008 to ask for financial advice. This is during the economic collapse in 2008. And so he was looking for, Jeffrey Epstein's consulting, I guess, in how to get through it. And since he lied to authorities about the nature of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, Staley was issued a fine of 1.8 million pounds.
I hate scams, especially the ones that target seniors, and Medicare is chock full of them. Between commission-hungry brokers and thousands of confusing plan options, most seniors aren't on the best plan for them. That's why we partnered with Chapter. They're fully independent and they work for you, not the insurance companies. They can review all your options in under 20 minutes, and the average senior they help saves over $1,100 a year. And the best part, it doesn't cost you a thing. Call the number on your screen today.
And banned from holding senior management roles in the city in 2023, leading to him losing about 18 million pounds worth of pay. This was a piece that was published in The Guardian, which is why they're using pounds as opposed to dollars. Now, later in the hearing, Thomas Massie asked Patel about the clients who were later identified by victims in the 302 files. So again, the 302 files refer to FBI Form FD-302 documents used by agents to summarize interviews with victims, witnesses, and suspects. So that's what he's referring to. And he has that documentation and he wants to ask Kash Patel about it. Let's take a look at what Kash Patel has to say.
That list also includes at least 19 other individuals, one Hollywood producer worth a few $100 million, one royal prince, one high-profile individual in the music industry, one very prominent banker, one high-profile government official, one high-profile former politician, one owner of a car company in Italy, one rock star, one magician, at least 6 billionaires, including a billionaire from Canada. We know these people exist in the FBI files, the files that you control. I don't know exactly who they are, but the FBI does.
That's fascinating. So there you have Thomas Massie, again, in possession of the 302 files, its descriptions of the clients. So again, obviously, through this line of questioning, Thomas Massie has caught the FBI director in yet another lie. Because what was the initial lie that kind of snowballed into the mess that the Trump administration is currently dealing with? Well, they promised to release the Epstein files, and then out of nowhere, you have a statement coming from the Trump administration alleging there is no client list. There were no clients. There's nothing to see here. That was a lie. That was very clearly a deception by the Trump administration to the American people, and it's pretty gross. So what does Kash Patel have to say about that?
Have you launched any investigations into any of these people, and have you seen these 302 documents?
Sir, I have asked my FBI agents to review the entirety of the Epstein files and bring forth any credible information, and we're working with Congress not only to divulge that information and produce it to you, but any investigations that arise from any credible investigation will be brought. There have been no new materials brought to me launching a new indictment.
That did not in any way satisfy Congressman Massie. He kept pushing. And this is where I believe Kash Patel gets caught in yet another inconsistency, another lie. Take a look.
So is the loophole here, or is it your assertion that these victims aren't credible, that the 302s maybe didn't produce credible statements that rise to a probable cause?
It's not my assertion, sir. It's the assertion of two different United States attorneys' offices from three separate administrations who investigated those same materials in lifetime.
Are the 302 documents in the FBI's possession?
They reviewed all that, yes, sir.
And so have you reviewed those 302 documents where the victims name the people who victimized them?
If I personally know, but the FBI has.
So how can you sit here and in front of the Senate and say there are no names?
I said
I named one today.
I said we are not in the practice at the Department of Justice FBI of releasing victims' names. That is not what we do. We are also not in the habit of releasing incredible information. That's not what we do. But multiple authorities have looked at the entirety of what we have.
You have to admit that moment was incredible. What would Kash Patel, prior to entering the Trump administration, have to say to anyone else, the previous FBI director, making the same argument before the House Judiciary Committee? Oh, he would definitely excoriate that person, accuse them of being part of a cover-up, because that's what this is. It's a cover-up. How do you say that there were no clients when you haven't? I mean, he just admitted right there that he hasn't reviewed the documents. That previous administrations, let me get the exact wording that he used. He basically places the onus on two different US attorneys' offices across three previous administrations. Okay, but you're FBI director. Why don't you review the alleged co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein's? Why don't you consider bringing charges forward? And more importantly, what's stopping you? What's stopping you? Man, Kash Patel is not good at this. We used to have more sophisticated liars in the administration, and that's the thing. We're really having a competency problem in this country, even when it comes to federal liars. And I guess that's a good thing, at least for the American people, because now we can actually see it happening in real time when we're being deceived. But that's what's happening here. And for whatever you might think about Thomas Massie's libertarianism and his stances on other political policies, you got to hand him a lot of credit for demanding justice for Jeffrey Epstein's victims and wanting transparency on behalf of the American people. That's what a leader does. And he deserves respect for that. I respect him for doing this. His line of questioning to me went beyond the usual typical political theater that we can see during these hearings. He wants answers, and he's holding Kash Patel's feet to the fire. Now, at this point, what remains a mystery to me is whether the expression on Kash Patel's face, that constant bug-eyed look of shock and fear, if it's just like his mainline, facial expression, or if he's really panicking. Because if he's not, he should. He's been outed as a fake, as a phony, as someone who's engaging in a cover-up, and I think it's wrong.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. totally not true. But it does keep you updated on our live shows.